Hi, I'm Vincent Molinari, and welcome to the Nest Summit, part of Climate Week New York City. Well, thrilled that we have Carl Pope here with us today. Carl is the principal advisor at Inside Straight Strategies. Carl, welcome and thank you for joining us today.
It's delightful to be with you.
Well, you made a lifetime of advocacy around the environment, around climate. You served as the climate advisor to Mayor Bloomberg and beyond while he was a presidential candidate. So very deep. I wanted to jump right into that. You put out a book with Mayor Bloomberg, Climate of Hope. Can we look at that as a foundation? Tell me what your thoughts were with Mayor Bloomberg on the book. What was some of the key components?
When Mike and I decided to do the book, we were concerned that the world continued to act as if the problem with solving climate was it was going to be bad news for the economy. And we thought it was going to be good news for the economy, and that ought to make it easier for us to move forward rapidly and actually tackle the climate problem. And since we published the book, whose premise was we can solve the climate problem by doing things that will make us more prosperous, that will make us healthier, and that will make us safer, all things we should like right now, whether or not there's a climate problem or not. There is.
Well, that's very fundamental, right?
Let's imagine it's good news. We're not talking about sharing a burden. We're talking about who gets the biggest chunk of an opportunity. And that's a different game. And since we published the book in 2017, over the past 3 years, we've seen continued dramatic falls in the cost of clean energy, continued loss of competitiveness by fossil fuels. Fossil fuels are losing out in the marketplace every week. Exxon was dumped out of the Dow Jones this year because its values have dropped so much. The coal industry, if you had stocks in coal and didn't divest them 3 years ago, you've lost 90% of your investment. So the reality is the world is moving towards a clean energy future. The only person who doesn't seem to understand that is the current president of the United States and the people around him. He is continuing to try to cling to the 20th century economy of coal and oil, in spite of the fact that countries as diverse as the European Union and China and India are racing to get off fossil fuels so they can be the energy superpower of the clean energy 21st century.
So let's touch on that a little bit, Carl. When we talk about globalization, we talk about competitiveness. You point out China, India, others advancing quite significantly in clean energy. Where do you think we really stand? What's the acid test? How far behind do you think we are?
Well, we're quite a bit behind in terms of national policy. Our saving grace is that the country has ignored Washington. Cities, states, and businesses have not done what Washington signaled they should do. They have not done what Washington encouraged them to do. They have instead looked globally and said, we don't want to fall below the Chinese. We don't want to continue to have polluted air from dirty power plants that cost more than new wind and solar. Right now, about 86% of our fossil fuel power plants could be replaced with 100% clean energy and reduce bills for energy consumers. What's not to like about that?
Yeah, well, listen, as a consumer myself, I like to hear about cost savings and reduction. What can you quantify what that might mean to a consumer when we talk about reduction?
Well, most of the studies that have been done about what would happen if we were to move aggressively to replace all our remaining coal and gas power with wind, solar, and geothermal, most of the studies show that we would, within 5 years, be able to bring power bills down by 10%. And over the long haul, they would come down even further. So we're really talking about, and that doesn't count the benefits that you get from clean air. And the clean air benefits would be immediate. The climate benefits will be long-term. The clean air benefits are immediate, and the economic gains are right now.
So let's talk a little bit more, Carl, if you would. You know, the connectivity to financial markets, valuations. You touched on Exxon. You touched on the precipitous decline of value of coal-oriented stocks and so forth. Are we entering a period now since your book where there's a greater recognition to climate, to responsibility, to the future, and how companies are being rewarded in their valuations, and the flip side, how they may be being penalized?
Well, we are, but I think the other half of the driver, and the half that we must not lose sight of, is if a clean energy transition was going to cost us more, it would be slow. When the clean energy transition makes us money, it can move very fast. And that's what's so disturbing about the president's behavior. He is slowing down the American economy's ability to catch up with the future. And that's not good for the pocketbook, much less for your lungs. So we need to understand this is not, well, most of my life we were tagging into the wind. Most of my life it was true. Getting stuff cleaner was going to cost money. We've now entered a period when getting stuff cleaner is going to save money. And that means you've got a tailwind. You're sailing downwind. And the danger you have is that if the wind's blowing behind you, go faster than your boat can capsize. So we're at risk, to be honest.
Well, that was going to be my question. There's such a dramatic shift then if you're moving from the headwinds to the tailwinds and moving precipitously. Does it go too fast? And where is the warning sign? And are we there now?
Well, it goes as fast as it goes. It's the wind. The market is the wind. The market is not something where I say, oh, the market's changing too fast. Let's slow it down. No, that's not how it works. The answer is you have to change the sails so that you're sailing downwind, and that's what Donald Trump is unwilling to do.
So talk to me about some of the other outcomes since your book. What would you highlight?
The other big outcome is that the reality, which is we've already disrupted the climate. We've destabilized the climate. We now have a climate we have made, and we didn't make it very intelligently, and it's not a very friendly one. So the fires we're having this year in California, the repeated hurricanes that have been hitting the Gulf Coast, the flooding in the Midwest, where 2 years ago, large parts of Iowa were underwater for months. All those are a reflection on the fact that when you warm the climate, you increase the amount of energy. When you increase the amount of energy, everything happens at a larger scale. You get bigger floods, you get bigger fires, you get bigger storms. All that's happening, and we need to start investing. We need to go from being a frontier community to being more like the Dutch. The Dutch have a country, a large part of which is under sea level. And since 1953, they haven't lost a single person to flooding, and they only spend $1.5 billion years on flood control because they spend it on prevention. We need to be investing heavily in preventing the burning down of rural Western communities from the fires. The fires will happen, they're natural. But fires burning down communities doesn't need to happen if we had a big enough fire department. I mean, let's be blunt. We have not taken small community fire protection seriously in this country. New York City has 10,000 firefighters for 200,000 acres. The U.S. Forest Service has 5,000 firefighters for 191 million acres. We are not investing enough in preventive coping with floods and fires and hurricanes.
Well, listen, let's jump into that a little bit more, because I believe so much of this is part of your op-ed, The Fire This Time, right? And really looking at the severity, looking at how perhaps you do have a national policy around firefighting, or is that regional? How do we move to be preventive to
invest
reactionary?
We invest. We've done this before. We did this 90 years ago. When Franklin Roosevelt came into office, we had the Dust Bowl, and Roosevelt created the Soil Conservation Service to figure out how to prevent wind-blown erosion, and in 5 years, they cut it in 50%. I think the next president, whoever it is, should set a 50% goal for cutting damages from wind, storm, and fire in 5 years. And we can do it. And we save money because right now what happens, we don't invest in keeping stuff ready for what it's going to face. And then when the disaster happens, we spend a fortune to clean it up. There was one incident in California where there was a defective spillway on the Oroville Dam. It would have cost a lot of money. Yeah, it would have cost $100 million to repair it. We didn't repair it. We had an overflow. It's cost us $1 billion to clean up the mess. So with ratios like 10 to 1, and with the government having to bail us out anyway, we'd be much smarter to have the government invest in prevention and in community protection. Community protection ought to be the center of our policy on fire, flood, and storm. And right now, it's community cleanup. That is stone foolish.
So we have to do a total reversal. We're moving to prevention, investing on the front end preemptively. As you say, we're going to pay for it either way, right? So
we'll pay less. We'll pay much less at the front end,
which I guess becomes the whole core to the
and
thing.
We don't lose lives. We don't lose economic. I mean, one of the huge costs that doesn't get counted from these fires is the economic activity in these Western communities that are dependent upon clean air and recreation get totally shut down. Nobody is up there because you can't breathe. So we need to get on top of this, and we need federal leadership to do so, because you don't know where the fires are going to happen. This year it's California, Washington, and Oregon. Next time it could be Colorado and New Mexico. We need to have firefighters that we can move where the fires are. We need more Pulaskis on the ground. A Pulaski is that big instrument they use to fight a fire. We need more people on the ground year-round, preventing communities from being exposed to fire, and then when the fires do happen, fighting them.
Well, Carl, thank you so much for joining us. And as we part, how do folks find out more about your work and can follow you on an ongoing basis?
They can follow me on Salon. I have my blog appears on Salon, so that's the best way to follow me.
Terrific. Carl, thanks again for joining us today.
Thanks. Terrific. Glad to be with you.